Hello, my name is Rhonda Abdella for TESOL 502. My research was on the role of ESL teachers pull-in or collaborating teachers. Why I chose this topic. In my district, I work in Crestwood School District. A few years ago, about 5 years ago, we were actually sued by the Department of Justice for lack of um, having enough support for ELLs. It's a long story, but at the end of it, what ended up happening is our district has been really making sure that they are supporting our ELL students, making sure that they have enough hours, that we're teaching them effectively. We are always watched, monitored, questioned, interviewed. So it is really important that, schools are following along with what they're supposed to be doing. It basically started with, a counselor in the district that felt that our ELLs were not getting enough support, and there was a lot of parents that felt that their students from the high school level were not ready for college. And so she went to the board more than a few times, and the board felt that they were doing the right thing, and she felt obligated to, question what was happening and the support that they were getting. So the Department of Justice was called, and there was a lawsuit. And so now, we're supposed to be watched for 5 years, but it seems like we're going to be continuing to do so. So it is very important for both push in and pull out ESL teachers to giving full support for their students. So I chose it because I felt like, I do speak Arabic. It is a large Middle Eastern population here in Crestwood School District. So I felt like that is something that I may want to do eventually, or maybe strictly teach ESL. So that was one of the reasons that I decided to do this research. All right, so what are the requirements? The federal government requires states to provide the programming to meet the ELLs, but it varies. So some states, some districts, sometimes it's even just the school itself and what they require. In our district, they give us 3 years to get the ESL endorsement. It is required. Most of the districts around here do require that, but I also found out that there's going to be a large, significant number of districts that will require some ESL endorsement or certificate, whether you teach ESL or not. Michigan does require to have an ESL endorsement if you're going to teach ESL, or not necessarily work with ESL students, but if you're going to push in or pull out, not as extra support, but as an ESL teacher, you do have to have that endorsement. What is the push-in model? So the push-in is inclusive, and it's just basically two teachers collaborating in a mainstream classroom. Now, the push-in teacher is also involved in what's happening with the students in that classroom. You can be part of a team to implement what kind of programs are going to be run or what curriculum they're going to run. A push-in teacher would work in small groups, maybe work one-on-one, but it's going to be in the general education classroom. And the hours all depend on the students themselves and their level. The pull-out model is when a student is pulled out from the general education classroom and into a small classroom setting. The teacher will have a certain strategy or a targeted instruction that they're going to work with, but the ESL teacher does all the planning for the pullout. There's nothing that the general education teacher is involved in when a student is getting pulled out. And usually it's a student with a beginning level, level 1 as a WIDA score. Now, co-teaching is something that most people are familiar with in the education world. And that's usually that has to do with more like special education. So co-teaching is a little bit more towards administrative support, IEPs, resources, equal status as far as what they're going to be teaching in the classroom. There's many different models that follow through. It could be a special education teacher and a general education teacher. It could be two general education teachers. So it's a larger let me see, how could I put this? So it's a larger concept than just someone coming in and pushing in for a short period of time and leaving, working just in the small group. The co-teaching is teaching the whole class and maybe targeting just certain students that might need that extra support, maybe in special ed or even sometimes in ELL. So push-in teachers are more concerned with one-to-one or small group teaching. The challenges of the push-in model. The ESL teachers are constantly being pulled up to do other tasks. So sometimes if there's something in the building that needs to be done or data that needs to be collected, or maybe it might be PBIS or whatever it may be in the school, it tends to happen, and it's not supposed to, but the ESL teachers' hours are a little bit more flexible because the teacher is not generally in a classroom. They could, they're supposed to be pushing in, and it could work where, well, today they're not going to push in for this hour because they're taking care of something else. So, and the ESL also does not know what the general education is teaching. So, what we're working on, what math lesson we're on, what science lesson we're on. There's no planning time with that general education teacher. So, it's not like they would give the general education teacher and the push-in teacher a certain time or planning time to meet with them, and so that the push-in teacher knows what to teach or what to work with. And sometimes that happens with me, where the push-in teacher would come in and we're like, okay, this is what we're doing right now. And I'd rush over there and say, okay, this is the worksheet, and these students really need to work on this. But at the same time, I'm leaving, the rest of the students maybe on the carpet or doing on something else. But in our building, we send our objectives to the ESL push-in teacher, to all ESL support in the beginning of the week. So they have them for the whole week. So when they look at our objectives, our content objectives, and our language objectives, they know exactly what we're teaching and what to expect that week. So that doesn't happen too much with us. And in the beginning, I kind of felt like, oh my God, this is kind of annoying. But at the same time, after reading all this research, I can understand how an ESL teacher can push in and really not know what's going on. The other thing that I kept reading over and over, and it was kind of disappointing, is there's lack of status in the classroom. So a lot of push-in teachers feel like they're just an aide. A lot of students don't really recognize that they are a teacher, or sometimes teachers themselves. I read a lot about that in every paper that I read, and it kind of was disappointing that they don't treat each other as equals, and one is always complaining about the other. So that rapport, that respect is kind of lacking in a sense. So I think that would be very uncomfortable to have to push in and feel like that teacher doesn't acknowledge me as an equal. So that was one of the challenges. The successes in push-in models. The student does not miss classroom instruction. So, by not getting pulled out, they know what's happening in the classroom. They feel supported. They're still working with their peers. But at the same time, a teacher can still advocate for program and resources needed. So, as a push-in teacher, I can see where we may lack or what we may need as far as resources, and I can give my input of what would help my ELL students in the general education classroom. And obviously, if there's, they can reach more students at one time rather than just pulling out one student. The challenges in a pull-out model. There is, a lot of buildings don't really have the space. And so when you're pulling out students, you need that small classroom setting. In our building, we ran into that, and every single year, as far as I know, the ESL teachers' classroom is getting smaller and smaller and smaller, or they're getting all pushed into one classroom because they do have a lot of materials and a lot of, additional resources that they work with these students. So, and then, if they're pulling the student out, like this happens with me too, the one student that they pull out, well, he's gone with the teacher. then he comes back, he has no idea what we did. And it's interesting because the student, tested at a beginning level, but he was born here. He does not even speak Spanish or read Spanish or understand Spanish, but yet he scored a WIDA score of a 1.9, so he gets pulled out. He could use that one-on-one time, but then when he comes back, he feels totally lost of what we were doing. And the other problem is there's a lot of time lost. Now, I'm in an elementary school building, which is pretty small, but when I was reading, there are some districts and some schools that are really huge. So when the teacher is coming to pick up that student or asking that student to get to the classroom, there's a good 5 to 8 minutes that could be lost on the way there and on the way back. But that is also time lost from their minutes that they're supposed to be, or their hours that they're supposed to be pulled out. And then sometimes the students love to leave, they just want to get out, they're bored or they're disengaged. But others, they don't want to leave because maybe there's a lab going on or something, a lot more interesting in the classroom. So that could be a challenge for a pullout teacher. The success in pullout is, the students feel very comfortable. They work in a small group, classroom setting. They love that one-on-one teaching, and more so when I was reading in the research of like the elementary school students, the younger students, and in like the high school, where that student knows and recognizes that they might be going to college, that they need that extra support. But then some students feel like they, may not. They do benefit from, like that target instruction that they're looking for. They actually found it a lot more effective. The pull-out model, 91% of the time, it was focused on reading and instructional activities in English. So it was focused more on English versus the push-in might be maybe science, math, social studies, other subjects that they may be learning and just need that extra support. So the pull-out model is more successful than the push-in model. The push-in model, they found more like about 40% effective, which is not good. 40 to 60%. Different articles, different research show different things. My opinion and my reaction to all of this, I still prefer the push-in. I like that extra support with the content that I'm teaching. So for me right now as a general education teacher, I still prefer the push-in model. I love that extra support. I really feel like my kids benefit for it. And if I'm going to be evaluated, my scores are going to be on basically what I'm teaching, the content that I'm teaching, then that push-in support helps a lot more than a pull-out teacher that's going to work just on the targeted English. I was disappointed to find out that most teachers didn't like pushing into classrooms just not feeling part of the class. It was like out of the 5 articles that I read, 4 of them stated that a lot of push-in teachers do not feel comfortable with the other teacher, or felt disrespected, or felt, and that really disappointed me. I really don't see that happening in my district, but I could see how it can happen. I've heard in other schools, it's hard to work sometimes with peers, but it really was a light bulb for me to be aware of that and to know that maybe that general education teacher might feel that way about me. So kind of how my action and reaction is going to be in the classroom. Also, pull out caused a lot of students to lose classroom content, loss of time. Again, if I'm going to go back and think about what I'm going to be evaluated on, and if that student's going to be pulled out, then they're missing on what I'm trying to teach, and their test scores may show that. So that was a concern for me. The other thing is too, if I'm going to be a push-in or an ESL teacher or pull out, being pulled away from my ELL students to do other tasks, although I really would not mind, but I feel like I would be disappointing that student. There's no consistency, and then I'm not actually doing what I'm supposed to be doing and hitting those minutes that I'm supposed to be working with that student one-on-one. So I feel like that's something that I really have to consider. I've gained a great insight to an ESL teacher, whether it be push in or pull out. I was kind of, even though that I've worked in a district, that's all I've known, and I've been a parapro before this, and I did the ESL, but I still learned a lot more than I thought I would. So it was really